Welcome everyone to the Major General Sohanlal Bhatia Memorial Oration 2022. I'm Radhika Hegde from the History of Medicine Department, and it's my honor and privilege to introduce you to this oration. As a curator of Bhatia Archives and Museum, it has been a pleasure to go through his writings, and I must confess that his life was quite eventful. A prolific thinker and a writer, Bhatia has left behind a vast body of work, which is both significant and interesting, as it provides us with some fascinating insights into pre- and post-independent India. Born in 1891 in Amritsar, he was the eldest of the 8 children to Hiralal Bhatia, who was an eminent surgeon. Should I switch it? After finishing his studies in Government College, Lahore, he went to Cambridge in England, where he finished his medical degree. It is here that he met Dr. A.V. Hill, professor of physiology, later a Nobel laureate, who remained his lifelong friend and a mentor. In 1916, Bhatia applied for Indian Medical Service and was posted as a regimental medical officer to a battalion of Maratha light infantry. For his exemplary courage shown in battle, young Bhatia was awarded the Military Cross by the British government. Later, in 1920, he was appointed as a professor of physiology and hygiene in Grant Medical College, Bombay, where he then became the dean of the college, a position that he held until his retirement in 1939. Although a soldier by profession, he was an ardent believer in ideas of democracy, coexistence of people across the caste and class lines. Professor A.V. Hill, in a foreword, wrote for Bhatia's book, Science and Humanities, mentions Bhatia as a proponent of peace, and I quote, "He looked like a soldier and he did distinguished service as a soldier. Perhaps because he still feels and thinks like a soldier and has the experience of 2 world wars that he writes so movingly in his book about the necessity of peace." Bhatia urged people to think beyond spheres of national groups and try to bridge the gap between different ideologies through dialogue and discussion rather than through violence and force. He wished to establish a firm connection between purely scientific viewpoint and a humanistic approach. He wrote much on making medical education inclusive. After his retirement in the 1950s, he settled in Bangalore and pursued his lifelong interest in the history of medicine. He continued to serve the government in various capacities, and one of his most important contributions was as a chairman of the Pharmaceutical Inquiry Committee in 1954. His report as a chairman of the Pharmaceutical Inquiry Committee provided recommendations that largely made India become self-sufficient in this area. It was in 1963 that the Dean of St. John's Medical College, Dr. Louis Montero, and the management invited Major General Bhatia to be the first emeritus professor of the Department of History of Medicine. Later, in 1974, the Museum of History of Medicine was set up, primarily built on Bhatia's collection and sustained through his generous deed of property at Banjara Hills in Hyderabad. While we celebrate 75 years of India's independence on August 15th, it is only fitting to remember Bhatia and others like him, who demonstrated their devotion to the democratic principles and beliefs, while also expressing a humane attitude to their conduct by dedicating their lives to the service of the humanity. On behalf of the director, the deans, and the faculty of St. John's Medical College and the Research Institute, we welcome you all to the Bhatia Oration 2022. I now request Dr. Manjulika Vaz to introduce our speaker, Dr. Sandeep Shastri.
Thank you, Radhika. I have the great honor and pleasure of introducing our esteemed speaker to you today. Dr. Sandeep Shastri is currently the Vice Chancellor of Jagran Lake City University, Bhopal. With close to 4 decades of experience in the field of research and teaching, Dr. Shastri is a political scientist who has been the pro-vice chancellor of Jain, deemed to be university, for over a decade. Also the director of research and training in the Jain group of institutions. And he has been the faculty in the Department of Political Science at Bangalore University for 2 decades. His research has largely been in the field of electoral studies, federalism, political processes, political institutions, and teaching and learning processes. He is also the co-chair of the research committee of the International Political Science Association that focuses on public opinion research. He is the national coordinator of the Lok Niti network. Dr. Shastri has authored over 13 books, more than 50 chapters in edited books, and more than 100 articles in reputed research journals. He is an active political commentator and an election and political analyst. He has been a consultant to the UNDP and has also been a consultant to the World Bank for its governance reforms project. He has helped with developing the constitution of new countries, such as South Sudan. Dr. Shastri enjoys being with students, teaching them and learning from them. So we are fortunate to have you with us today to deliver the 2022 Major General S.L. Bhatia Oration on democratizing our understanding of democracy, lessons learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, and its wider implications for social structures and processes. Thank you, Dr. Shastri. Over to you.
So thank you for that very, very warm welcome, ma'am. It's truly a delight, pleasure, and honor to be here at this iconic institution and to celebrate the memory of somebody who represents the essence of humanism and a humanitarian approach. I bring to all of you the warm wishes of the entire Jagran Lake City University family. I have for the last 18 months made Madhya Pradesh my adopted home, whereas for 40 years Karnataka was my real home. So now there is a conflict between my adopted home and real home as to where should my loyalties lie. But like a good politician, I would say my loyalties lie with both. As a student of politics, I tend to, having studied politics for so many years, sometimes tend to think and behave in the way politicians think of issues. Friends, I have been one of those lucky people whose family and its health has greatly benefited from St. John's medical institutions. From my son's childhood days till he was 11 or 12, the pediatricians at this hospital were people we used to visit very frequently. And my son used to be actually those days very happy to come to the hospital because the pediatricians had provided all sorts of toys for him to play as he and we discussed with the doctor the health of our son. So I thought I would use today's occasion to express my gratitude to the doctors at this hospital and in one sense, I would represent one of those thousands and thousands of families who have that sense of gratitude towards the work that all of you individually and collectively do. And congratulations, compliments, and thank you to each and every one of you. For my younger students here, that's the burden you carry as you go forward. Across the world, when I have traveled and when I have met Indian doctors, and with that twinkle in their eyes and the enthusiasm in their face, they tell me that they are graduates of this institution. I know where they have reached and why they have reached where they have reached. And all of you have a similar mantle to carry as you go forward. Friends, what all I would want to say today, I would like to dedicate to the more than 30,000 students who in the last 40 years have allowed me to learn with them in their classroom. I don't think I taught anybody, but these young boys and girls allowed me to learn with them. And what I plan to say as part of today's oration, I would like to dedicate to all those students. And it's my good fortune that today's oration is in the name of Major General Bhatia. In some senses, I would see him as a humanitarian face of medicine who crisscrossed very, very, very seamlessly the boundaries of medicine, science, philosophy, ethics, and history. And Major General Bhatia did many years ago what the government of India today is trying through the National Education Policy 2020, which is to break disciplinary boundaries, to ensure that a student of medicine and a student of engineering has an understanding of social reality in which she will operate. That a student of social sciences understands the magnificence of what technology represents and is likely to play a role in his or her daily life. I think the theme I have chosen for today, after discussions with Radhika over several emails, and when she told me what Major General Bhatia represented, I said the best way to remember what he did was to talk about democratizing our understanding of democracy. If Major General Bhatia was there during the pandemic and saw what happened to society, social processes, and human living in those days, I'm sure some of the issues I would raise today would have been very, very, very close to his heart. So what is the focus of what I'm going to talk about today? As students of medicine, we are used always to a very, very systematic and symptomatic analysis of an issue. So I would like to do the same with regard to democracy. The idea of democracy, the design of democracy, the outcomes of democracy, and the challenges of democracy. The very idea of democracy. Whenever I do a survey in India and ask people, should India be a democracy? 95% plus will say, yes, we want India to be a democracy. The idea of democracy is very deep. But friends, is the imagination of democracy equally deep? That's my question. The idea versus its imagination. I know that a patient has a problem. but do I understand the depth of that problem? And I don't know if I'm putting my head in the lion's den. Is it that sometimes in our rush for an answer, we mistake a symptom for the disease and then try to treat the symptom and forget the disease? And I would bring that debate to democracy. The idea of democracy is strong. Is the imagination of democracy equally strong in terms of its design, in terms of its outcomes? Once I remember a doctor friend told me that a patient told him that I took all the medicines you gave, doctor, but I'm still not okay. I took all the medicines you gave me, but I'm still not okay. I did all that your democracy asked me to do, but still there is a problem. And that's why I raised the question of democratizing of democracy, democratizing of our understanding of democracy. And I'll have to narrate a small incident before I actually come to that. And this may have been your school experience also. Radhika ma'am, tell me if I'm correct or not. From KG to PG, when we talk of democracy, Abraham Lincoln's famous quotation always comes. By the people, for the people, of the people. Whether you are in 4th grade or 8th grade or 12th grade or first year undergrad or first year postgrad, I will not be surprised if each of these teachers uses the same quotation and guilty party number 1 is standing in front of you. So I did this once in the class in the 1990s, and one bright young student stood up in my class and asked me, "Professor, you say 20% of the world lives in South Asia." I said, "Yes. And you also told us in your last class," that's where history comes back to visit you. You also said in your last class that entire South Asia at the moment is formally at least a democracy. I said, "Yes." Then she asked me, "Professor, does 20% of the world have no definition of democracy? Do I keep having to hear from KG to PG that by the people, for the people, and of the people?" And she told me also, she taught me that day. That's why I say my students have been my greatest teachers. She said, "Sir, can I add a small change to what you said?" I said, "Yeah, tell me." "Yes, democracy is by the people, but it is BUI, not BY. Democracy is of the people, but it's OFF and not OF. And democracy is for the people, not FOR, but FAR." I got agitated because she is challenging the fundamentals of my class. We had a good debate. But why am I referring to this, friends? That day, I and my friends were waiting for an opportunity to come up with an Indian definition of democracy. Democratize our understanding of democracy. Do I need a Western telescope to understand my soil? Do I need a Western prism to look at my society? Can I contextualize democracy to my country? Can I talk of my democratic norms? Can I talk of my challenges? And the last point, can I pluralize my appreciation? When I say democratizing the meaning of democracy, if in this hall, at this moment of time, I give a slip of paper to everybody and tell them, give me a 1-sentence definition of democracy, and I've learned in 40 years that 1 sentence should not be more than 25 words. because one of my students wrote one sentence of 500 words once. So I want a one sentence definition of democracy. I'm sure if there are 75 people sitting here, we will have at least 70 definitions of democracy, because each of us has our way of looking at it. So my question is, can we democratize our understanding of this democracy? The chance came to us in the early 2000s when we did a study in South Asia. We did it in 5 countries then: Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. And remember, I gave the country's name in alphabetical order so that nobody tells me I gave one country more importance than the other. We did the study in these 5 countries: Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. Please go back to your alphabets and see whether I was correct or not. And we asked people there, according to you, what is democracy? We got answers in more than 22 languages. We translated all of them back to English. It took us a year to create the categories in India alone. And what did we find? What did we find? How do common citizens in India look at democracy? And what we found in India was that 28%, which is 1 out of every 4 plus, defined democracy in the language of justice and welfare. Democracy as justice. Democracy as welfare. What is justice? Many years ago, my students were protesting about something. We want justice. I stopped one of them. What do you want? I don't know. We want justice. One day in a class, we debated this and we said, again, so many definitions, but ultimately we came up with the point that justice means getting what is rightfully, legitimately yours. So 1/4 of people in India said democracy is about getting what is rightfully, legitimately yours. Justice is about welfare and well-being. And one of the things I'm finding in our election studies is, if there is a popular perception that a government has worked for the well-being of the people, there is little doubt that it is voted back to power. And a government where people perceive, I'm not talking of performance, perception, where people perceive that a government has not done enough for its well-being, such a government is often voted out. So in fact, through that study, we enriched the definition of democracy, not just of democracy as freedom, not just of democracy as equality, not just of democracy as rights, not just of democracy as rule of law, but brought in this Indian and South Asian perspective that democracy is about welfare and well-being. It is about freedom from fear as well as freedom from want. We required no better revisiting of this than the pandemic, when the pandemic taught us freedom from fear and freedom from want as being so critical. Friends, let me come to a few substantive issues now for my analysis. For the generation sitting in front of me, the 21st century India, for the younger generation in India, I have often in my discussions with the younger generation found that they understand democracy in 3 words. The content, what is it that is there for me in this process? The content. I was once interviewing a first-time voter. And I asked her, for you, what is this democracy about? And her answer was very simple. Her answer was, if I can go out to the street and proudly tell people if they ask me who my MLA and MP is, forget whether I know his or her name, can I proudly take that name? And if people ask me, what did this representative do for your area? Can I proudly say he or she did this for my people? The content, the contact. And to highlight the contact, let me take an example. Now, I often believe the best way to reinforce a point is through an example. In 1999, we had a very major election in India, and I had gone to my classroom to ask my students, who of you will join us in the field to do our survey? Because unlike you medicine students who have wonderful laboratories to work in, which is your hospitals itself, my social science students often ask me, where is our laboratory? And I tell them, your laboratory is not within four walls, it is this wide world. So I was telling my students, what you studied in the class, here is an opportunity to learn it in the outside world. So I asked them, who is going to the field to do our survey? Many of them raised their hands. One of my bright young students of that batch, she said, I want to go, but I have a condition. See, all of you always have conditions with regard to what you want us to, when we ask you to do something, conditions come up. She had a condition. I said, what's your condition? She said, sir, I have never been to a village. I've always lived in a city. Okay. If you send me to a village, I will take part in your study. I acted as if that was a very difficult decision to make. I was happy because at that point of time, it was difficult to get girl students to go to the village. And I told her, after great deliberation, I found a place for you to go. Now I'll tell you, like a good Hindi cinema, what happened, what she told me after she came back, and then what happened when she went to the field. Ma'am, she completed her study and came back and met me. She said, sir, I said, yes. I have been studying in your department for the last 18 months doing my master's. I said, yes. Sir, I said, yes. During the last 18 months, you people taught me nothing. No. Many of you are smiling and looking at each other. If I tell this to other students also, they'll say, what is so great about what she told you? A lot of people felt that, but she had the guts to tell it to me straight. So I asked her, why do you feel that? She said, last 2 weeks, what I learned in the field, you people did not teach me for the last 18 months. Now, in 1999, I had already been teaching for 17 years. So somewhere that 17 years experience came up, and I said, that's why I sent you to the field. That's why I sent you to the field. Now, sir, flashback. What happened in the field for her to tell me what she told me? She said, sir, my work was supposed to start the day after voting. I went to the field on the day of voting itself. Morning 8:30, sir. A line of 100 people were standing to vote. I was shocked. 100 people standing in a queue I have seen in Bangalore city. Outside KSCA stadium, when match is there. Outside the kerosene shop. Outside these places, I have seen 100 people standing. But never for voting. And she said, I was very curious watching that line go forward. And there was one young lady in that line. I kept watching her go. She went in and she came out. And I went up to her, my student says, this was not part of her work. This was not part of her field work. This was her additional work. She went up to that lady and asked her in Kannada, Amma, did you vote? Now, ma'am, if you were in that person's position, what would you have seen? You have seen me standing there, go in, come out. And what are you asking me? Did you vote? If I was there in Kannada, I would say, Yen kan kanalva ninge. But this lady was a very nice person. She said, yes, child, I voted. Then my student got ready with her second question. Whom did you vote for? Whom did you vote? She remembered Dr. Shastri's lecture. Voting is sacred, voting is serious, voting is private. Don't tell anybody who you voted for. So let me see if Dr. Shastri was correct or not. Whom did you vote for? You know the answer? I don't know who I voted for. Now, this we had never taught in the classrooms. What the lady actually meant is, I don't know how to read and write. I was looking at the symbols and I voted for the symbol I wanted. I don't know who I voted for, what symbol I know. Then my student asked the third question. Do you think this voting will make any difference in your life? She said, no difference in my life. Now, this also we had never taught in the classroom. One of my other colleagues had told the class once that people are sometimes paid money to vote. So she thought maybe this is that type. But she was too scared to ask her who is giving you money now for voting. But this lady understood my student's dilemma and said, come, you want me to explain what I did? Come, sit down. They sat down and this lady asked my student, do you know who was standing behind me? My student said, no. The richest landlord of this village was behind me. Do you know who was behind him? No. There is only one temple in this village. The priest of that temple was behind him. And do you know who was behind him? No. By now, my student was thoroughly confused. Why this who is who of the village? And then this lady says, I am a daily wage laborer. The man who gives me the salary every day at the end of the day was standing behind. And then my student says, sir, this lady who has not even completed 5th standard taught me a lesson on democracy, which you people never taught me in the classroom. And what was that? This lady asked my student, child, is there any other line in this country where I can complete my job before these people can complete their job? Think about the answer. Is there any other line in this country where I can complete my job before all these people can complete their job? It's only on election day if I come early and I can stand in front of all these people. My student wrote an article after that Indian elections are not about voting alone. They are about a fundamental social transformation that is going on in this society. To cut a long story short, when the student of mine came back for her PhD work, she went to the same village. She couldn't find this lady anywhere. Then exiting the village, she went to the panchayat office. And there she was sitting now as a panchayat member. And that lady said, the journey began standing in that line, waiting to vote. And when she went for her postdoctoral work to that village, that lady had become the Adhyaksha of the Taluk Panchayat. And the lady said the same thing. My journey began standing in that line. Context and contact and content. The 3 C's of democracy, which I beseech the younger generation to please constantly keep in mind. I draw your attention to the pandemic that we went into. I want you to move from BC to DC. Before Corona to during Corona. We are now in AC. BC to DC to AC. We are now in after Corona. Though all of us are wearing our masks, and rightly so, I think those days are gone. Days of, however much you may not like it, days of offline engagement are a reality now. But if you go back to the DC days, during Corona days, with the onset of the pandemic, for me, there were certain important lessons of democracy that pandemic taught us. Lesson number one, in spite of liberalization, privatization, globalization, etc., 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 the state for a large percentage of India continues to be a provider. And many of you of the doctors community were part of the government effort of being providers. The pandemic reminded us of that reality, that however much we may go into LPG, the state for many is a provider. If you see the difference between the first wave, the second wave of the pandemic, the first wave, we were all struggling to understand what is happening. In the second wave, we were there with a greater degree of preparedness. If you remember, first wave, a lockdown was declared, and within X number of hours, everything got shut down. In the second wave, the Prime Minister prepared us for a lockdown and also told us this will happen differently from region to region. Democratizing our way of running democracy. How proactive were we as part of our solution to the problem? I believe, and you should correct me if I'm wrong, we handled the third wave of our pandemic much better because we were much more proactive in terms of what we did. And even today, if we are able to deal with the challenge more effectively, I think it's because of the fact of proactiveness that all of us have shown. Let me come to my two final points before I conclude what I would like to say. The democratizing of democracy in India is about dealing with the challenges of deepening democracy, what I would call the 3 C's. The 3 C's of democracy: collaboration, competition, and coordination. The first one, the dynamics of collaboration. You in the medical community were the front ones to know that dealing with a health pandemic involved effective collaboration. And I raised that question for democracy also. Have we become an election-only democracy? The only time democracy seems to be visible is when elections happen. And elections in India are like the festival of India. When Sankranti is over, the next festival will come. When that is over, Eid will come. When that is over, Dasra will come. When that is over, Diwali will come. When that is over, Christmas will come. And when that is over, New Year will come. And then the cycle continues. Have elections become like that? We just thought the Punjab, Uttar Pradesh elections were over and were waiting. And now we are all talking of the Gujarat elections at the end of the year. Have we become, and I'm going to use a stronger term, sir, have we become an election-obsessed democracy? Is it because our democracy should have multiple windows, but only one window is open? And which is that window? The election window. The only moment where the citizen of India becomes visible as a participant is on that election day. I think the current move of our Prime Minister is a very clever move. The whole Tiranga movement, where every citizen is asked to take ownership for the flag of the country. Now, I have often believed that how do we make you and me as citizens, rather than becoming sleepy participants in the S.L. Bhatia Memorial Oration, I'm sorry, rather than becoming sleepy participants of Indian democracy, how do we become active listeners and vibrant participants of that? That for me is the first challenge of democratization, democratizing democracy. Challenge number 2, the compulsions of competition. Radhika ma'am, I think you are a gold medalist, right? Did that help you when you started teaching? Could you take that into your class? I'm a gold medalist. Your students would have told you, so what if you're a gold medalist? What am I implying? What am I implying? As a doctor, when you face your patient is not interested in the degrees you have. The patient is worried. Like in Madhya Pradesh, I heard one patient tell his doctor, क्या आप मुझे ठीक कर सकते हो? आपका डिग्री नहीं चाहिए मुझे. मैंने 500 लोगों को ठीक किया, वो तो ठीक है, 501 को ठीक करोगे? To translate that into in English, you may have treated 500 people. I am the 501st. Will you treat the 501st also? What I mean is, friends, the gap between promise and performance. Can we democratize our democracy in terms of promise versus performance? I won't take any names because Radhika warned me, don't take any names. But just before the 2019 elections, one very, very well-known politician said to me, Shastri ji, if elections have to be won, people should think I'm honest, not I'm honest. People should think I'm honest. If I can say it in Hindi, लोगों को लगना चाहिए कि मेरा नियत साफ है. मेरा नियत साफ है ना ये नहीं, अलग प्रश्न. लोगों को लगना चाहिए. People should think that I am honest. To doctors, I'm raising this question. To the entire medical community and to all those involved in various fields of work, including those in my field of work, teachers, or those I study, politicians. The gap between promise and performance. And my last question. Democratizing democracy is about the imperatives of coordination. Does my left hand know what the right hand is doing? Many a time my left hand does not know what my right hand is doing. I have heard patients say, "Arey doctor, what are you saying? Previous doctor who came half an hour ago told me exactly the opposite." Now, you can joke it away by saying that doctor looked at another part of your body. I am looking at another part of your body. But the question I'm raising is, does the password for success in any field of work lie in the imperatives of coordination of all involved? And is the democratization of democracy about mobilizing people, mobilizing resources for the achievement of targets? Friends, I'd like to close with this final argument that I want to make. In this 21st century India, when I ask citizens about democracy, citizens are committed to engaging and working with democracy. They are committed to it. There is that spirit to participate. If I could use a business language, people continue to invest in democracy, hoping for a future dividend in democracy. We invest in your learning medicine in the hope of a future dividend that you will contribute to the health of this country. So the Indian citizen has invested in democracy, hoping for that dividend. So I end with the point I began with, the promise of democracy. The promise of the oath you all take the day you get your degree. The promise that political leadership makes when you voted to power. How slogans change in 5 years. Somebody started off their campaign by saying, "Yes, we can." Remember? Next election, "Yes, we still can." After 4 years, "Yes, we still can." Good days are coming. After 4 years, we still said good days are coming. But some people said it with an exclamation mark. Some people said it with a question mark. Two different meanings. Radhika, both sides I'm telling you. The promise of democracy. The moment it becomes a New Year resolution, there is a problem. That promise of democracy, the citizen of India still waits for that dividend of that investment. And I think your generation will see. We are next week going to celebrate 75 years of independence. Your generation will be there to celebrate the century of independence. Your generation will be decision makers at that point of time. So what happens to that promise of democracy in that 100th year of democracy? That is, for me, the democratizing of democracy. That, for me, is the vision that Major General Bhatia stood for, worked for, lived for, invested for, and left a legacy behind for. Thank you so much for giving me a patient hearing. And I do hope some part of it resonates with your life, your living, your goals, your aspirations, your ambitions, and the future that you wish to create for yourself. All the best, good luck, and Godspeed.
It's very perfect, Professor Shastri. It couldn't have been a moment less, because that was really thought-provoking. Thank you so much. I hope all our students will hold on to those lessons and walk that promise of democracy and journey to active citizenship as we move ahead. Dr. Shastri, I'd like you to come up to the podium, and I request our Associate Director of St. John's Medical College and Research Institute to do us the honor of showing our gratitude to Professor Shastri. Just like to also say who Professor Reverend Charles David is. He's just not an administrator, but he is a moral theologian, a double doctorate in bioethics, and his magnus opus was actually on human dignity in world religion towards the global bioethics and bio law. And I think that ties in so well with this idea of democratizing democracy. I think it is apt and appropriate on this day for Reverend Father Charles to hand over the token of our appreciation to you, Professor Shastri.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Also have a small memento, which is a book by Bhatia himself that we are handing over.
Give my book also.
Okay, that's again another honor of providing the book. Thank you very much for your time. So we are also using this day where we remember and celebrate the founder of the History of Medicine Department in St. John to launch an online version of this museum. The pandemic actually taught us that a lot can be done in the virtual world. And in a situation where, getting together in a physical space is difficult, the online mode is actually a great opportunity to connect with people across distance and who have difficulty with access. So we have made a small beginning with a social cultural project on the history of typhoid fever in Bangalore. And this was supported by the University of Oxford. It is an eclectic collection of maps, images, of interviews, of art, and of song. We are grateful to Google Arts and Culture for hosting one set of galleries, and the museum consultant Ajay Bhatt for helping us to develop what you would be more familiar with, which is a gaming app, a gaming site called Gather Town, which takes you through the streets of Bangalore, the sights and the sounds. Right now, we don't have the smell that we capture. This technology will do that shortly. Please do visit the site, but for you to get a preview, we have a small trailer, and I'm going to invite Reverend Dr. Charles to launch this online virtual exhibition.
A lot of people have gone into making this exhibition. We invite you to go and visit the site, to visit you. We also welcome feedback because we have a lot to learn in this journey. And now hand over to Bhatia for the final word. Thanks.
As this is an oration, we do not have questions, but Dr. Sandeep Shastri will be available and you can actually talk to him if you have any queries or you want to discuss anything. So I would like to thank our esteemed speaker, Dr. Sandeep Shastri, for accepting our invitation to deliver this oration. My sincere thanks to the director, the associate director, Father Charles, and deans of the Medical College and the Research Institute for supporting us in all our activities. Our special thanks to the CMS, who took his time from his busy schedule and joined us today. I want to extend my gratitude to our IT team, Mr. Ali, Mr. Deena, for helping us in setting up an online platform. Mr. Prakash for handling logistics and answering all my queries. Special thanks to our support staff, Ms. Krishnaveni, the Health and the Humanities team, Dr. Manjulika, Dr. Olinda, Father Chris, Ms. Priyanka, and especially all of you for attending this oration.